What is Next.js? Next.js is a React framework. This means that Next.js is built on top of React. So then why should we use Next.js? Why don't we just use React? That's because Next gives us additional features on top of React. This makes it extremely easy for us to make web applications. So Next basically simplifies React. Just like React simplifies JavaScript and HTML, Next simplifies React. So guys, for these reasons alone, people would choose Next.js over React, but these aren't even the most important reasons as to why we choose Next over React. The most important reason is that Next gives us better search engine optimization than React. So it gives us better SEO. So for those of you who don't know what search engine optimization is, it's basically when you search something on Google and how high your web page ranks on those results. So if your website has better SEO, then it will rank higher on Google searches than other websites. And that's why Next is so popular among top tech companies. It's because they want their website to rank as high as possible on Google searches, so more people click on them. So just a quick recap of what we said so far is that the most important reason as to why top tech companies use Next over React is that it gives better SEO. But how does Next do that? How does Next have better SEO? Well, it's because of something called server-side rendering. So guys, now let's go through what server-side rendering is. Before we can understand what server-side rendering is, we need to understand how Google ranks its pages. So how does Google rank their search results? So let's take front-end simplified as an example. So when you go on Google and you search up front-end simplified, you have the front-end simplified link displayed as the first link, and then you have all the other links in the bottom. So how does Google know to display these links? So essentially Google's bots, which are called crawlers, are searching through the entire internet, and then they're going through all the HTML in all the web pages in the internet, and they're searching through all the content in those HTML files, and then they're indexing it so that when you search for something, they can go through their index and then display the links on Google. But the way that React works, it's hard for these bots to index those pages, and I'll show you why. So we need to understand how React works. Well, React renders the page using something called client-side rendering, or CSR. This is different to how Next renders the page. It uses server-side rendering. So the way that client-side rendering works is that you have a browser or the client, so this is Google Chrome or something, and then what happens is that the browser starts off with an empty HTML file. Well, it's not really empty, but it looks something like this. It just has a div with nothing inside it. So it's essentially an HTML shell. And this code snippet is from the React index.html page. So if you create a React app and then you go to the index.html file in it, you will see this there. As you can see, it starts off with just an empty div with nothing inside. So this is what the browser sees first. It sees an empty HTML file. And then the browser uses JavaScript to fetch the content and then render it on the page. So that's what you see. So just to repeat how client-side rendering works, so the browser starts off with an empty HTML file, so it has a div with nothing inside it, and then the browser uses JavaScript to fetch the content and then display it on the web page. So then that's when you see all the rendered content. So it initially starts off as an empty div. This is important because when it starts off as an empty div, there are no content inside. So the bots, they can't go through any of the content because no content exists. That's why we get bad SEO results with React. Because initially with React, the web page starts off as an empty HTML file, so there is no content inside it, so Google's bots cannot search through the content and then index them. But this is different to how Next works. So how does Next work? Next renders the page using something called server-side rendering, or SSR. So the way server-side rendering works is that you have a server, so this is where your app is hosted, so like Vercel or something, and then you have the browser. So what happens in server-side rendering is that you have the content that gets loaded in the server. So once it's loaded in the server sends it to the browser. So the first thing the browser or the client sees is the fully loaded content. So this way, the browser does not start off with an empty HTML file at first. It starts off with the full content. So this way, Google's bots can go through this content and then index all this content. So when someone searches for this content, Google can go through their index and then display the links to this content on the search results. So this is why server-side rendering is so powerful and it gives us better SEO results. And this is why Next is so popular among top tech companies. So guys, this finishes the server-side rendering section of this crash course. So that's enough of the slides and the theory stuff, and now let's build our first Next.js application. So guys, go to your desktop and then create a new folder. You can name it anything. I'll be naming it Next Crash Course. And then once you create the folder, drag it onto VS Code, and then this should open the folder in VS Code, and then open up your terminal, and then type this with me. npx space create dash next dash app, and then a space and a dot. This dot will make sure that the next app is installed in the current directory. So then once you press enter, you'll be given the option to install TypeScript. So use your arrow keys to select no. We won't be using TypeScript for this project. And then would you like to use ESLint? We'll select no and then press enter. And then this will install Next for you. So once all the dependencies have been installed, go to the terminal and then type npm space run space dev and then press enter. This will start your server and then you can see the template that Next.js gives us. So open the link, localhost 3000. And then you can see this is the Next template. So let me just full screen these apps. So guys, this is a template that's been given to us by Next.js. If you look at the folder structure here, it's quite different to React. So let's go through all the folders here, starting from the styles folder. So in the styles folder, you have all your CSS files. So that's pretty straightforward. And then you have the public folder. This is where you have your public assets like favicons and all that. And then you have the pages folder. This is the most important folder. This is where the code for this template lives. So if you look at in TypeScript, so use your arrow keys to select. You can name it anything. I'll be naming it Next Crash Course. And then once you create the folder, drag it onto VS Code, and then this should open the folder in VS Code, and then open up your terminal, and then type this with me. npx space create dash next dash app, and then a space and a dot. This dot will make sure that the next app is installed in the current directory. So then once you press enter, you'll be given the option to install TypeScript. So use your arrow keys to select no. We won't be using TypeScript for this project. And then would you like to use ESLint? We'll select no and then press enter. And then this will install Next for you. So once all the dependencies have been installed, go to the terminal and then type npm space run space dev and then press enter. This will start your server and then you can see the template that Next.js gives us. So open the link, localhost 3000. And then you can see this is the Next template. So let me just full screen these apps. So guys, this is the Next.js gives us. Then press enter and then type npm. So once we'll install, would you like to use ESLint? We'll select no and then press enter. And then this will install Next for you. So once all the dependencies have been installed, go to the terminal and then type npm space run space dev and then press enter. This will start your server and then you can see the template that Next.js gives us. So open the link, localhost 3000. And then you can see this is the Next template. So let me just full screen these apps. So guys, this is a template that's been given to us by Next.js. If you look at the folder structure here, it's quite different to React. So let's go through all the folders here, starting from the styles folder. So in the styles folder, you have all your CSS files. So that's pretty straightforward. And then you have the public folder. This is where you have your public assets like favicons and all that. And then you have the pages folder. This is the most important folder. This is where the code for this template lives. So if you look at index.js, you can see all the code for this template over here. So we have the main tag and over here we have get started by editing. So if you edit this to say hello world and then you save the file, you should see hello world appearing over here. So this is pretty much the same as a React app, but we don't need all this, so you can delete everything. And we can just return a fragment that says hello world. And once you save, you should just see hello world on the web page. And inside this pages folder, we also have a document.js and an app.js and an API folder. We'll come back to these later. These are not important for now. Right now, what's important is this index.js file. So guys, for this course, we're making some sort of social media website where we'll have a page for posts and a page for users. So for now, our website is lacking a navbar, so let's make one now. So how you make components in Next is pretty much the same as React. So you create a components folder, and inside this folder you have a file called navbar.js. And then in this file you'll be exporting a function. So export default function. Let's call that navbar. And we'll be returning some JSX. So return, we'll have a nav. And inside the nav, we'll have an unordered list. And inside this unordered list, we'll have lists. So we'll have a home page, and then we'll have a page for the posts and a page for the users. So once you save this file, you can use this component in other parts of the app. So if you go to index.js, so we can auto import the navbar. So as you can see, the navbar appears in your autocomplete. So once you press enter, the navbar should be automatically imported from the components folder. And then we need to close this tag. And then once you save your file, you should see the navbar appearing. So let's get rid of this hello world. So let's just get rid of that. And then we have the navbar over here. Let me just zoom into Chrome so you can see this more clearly. So that's our navbar over here. Obviously this needs some styling. So let's go style this right now. So guys, there's two ways you can style this navbar. So if you look at the styles folder, you can see two files. There's the globals.css file and the home.module.css file. This is where you have the styles that will apply to your entire application. So if you go down and you target the nav element, and then we give it a display of flex, and then we justify content to the center, and then you save, you can see the styles appearing in the navbar. So now we can target the unordered list, and then give that also a display of flex, and then we can give it a gap of say 24 pixels. And then we want to get rid of this bullet point, so we can say the list style is none. So once you save, you can see that they're gone. And now let's also give the nav some padding. So padding of 16 pixels. And then we can give it a background color to separate it from the rest of the application. So you can say background color hot pink. And once you save, you can see the navbar with the pink background. So this is one way you can style components in Next.js. You can use the globals.css file. And this was alright. But what if you wanted to use the unordered list again? So if you go to your index.js, and then we have another unordered list, and then we have our list inside. So item 1 and a bunch more. So once you save, you can see your list appearing here, but you can see that the styles of the navbar has been applied to this list. But we don't want that. We want this to be listed in bullet points. And that's because in our globals.css, in the unordered list, we have a display of flex. So if you use the globals.css file to style your elements, then you need to make sure that you come up with a bunch of different class names. And that can get pretty messy and confusing pretty quickly. But there is a solution to this problem, and that's using CSS modules. So what a CSS module does is that it scopes a particular CSS file to a specific component. So this saves you the worry from coming up with different class names for different components. So to create a CSS module file, all we have to do is create a new file, and we have to make it end in .module.css. So you can name the first bit anything, but it has to end in .module.css. So in our case, it's going to be navbar.module.css. And then we can cut the styles from the globals.css file, and we can paste it over here. As you can see, the styles disappeared. That's because it's not in our globals.css anymore. And then we have to go to our navbar.js file, and then we need to import the style sheet. So we can say import styles. So that's what we'll be naming it from. So we have to go out one directory. So you have to say // and go to the styles directory, and then /navbar.module.css. So guys, once you save, you will see this error over here. It says syntax error, selector nav is not pure. So guys, in module.css files, you can't have pure selectors. So you can't have a nav and a UL. They need to be class names. So we can just add a dot in front of it. And that will get rid of this error. But as you can see, the styles are still not being applied, and that's because we don't give any of the styles to our elements. So guys, this CSS file that we imported as styles, this acts like a JavaScript object. So guys, if you console.log the styles, so we're just console.logging the styles that we just imported. And then once we save and we open up our console, you can see an object is being logged. So if you expand this object, you see that it has a nav key and a UL key. And isn't that the name of the classes that we have in our navbar CSS file? So guys, this shows that the CSS file that we just imported is a JavaScript object, and the keys in this object are the class names that we made in our CSS file. So if we want our elements to have these styles, we need to reference those keys. So for example, if we want our nav to have the nav style, then we need to reference the nav key in this styles object. So we can say the class name. This will not be a string, this will be a JavaScript object, and inside this we'll be accessing the nav key inside the styles object. So we can say styles.nav. And then if we save, you can see that the nav styles are applied to the nav element. Now, if you want our unordered list to have the styles of this UL class, then we need to access the UL key in the styles object. So we'll be doing the same thing. So we'll say the class name is the styles.ul. And once you save, you can see the styles are applied. So this is how you use CSS modules in Next.js. So this module system scopes this certain file to this specific component. So this way you don't have to worry about coming up with a bunch of different class names for different elements, because Next.js does that automatically if you use the module system. So just to make this more clear for you, when we console.log styles, we can see that we have an object being logged, and inside the object we have our class names as the keys, which is navbar_nav, and then has some random characters attached to the end. So Next.js does that automatically for us. It attaches random letters towards the end of the class name so that all class names are unique and we don't have any conflicts. So that's why using this module system is so useful. This prevents you from coming up with a bunch of different class names for different elements. So that's how you would use CSS in Next.js. And guys, this concludes the CSS module section of this crash course. And now we'll be covering routing, so let's get right into it. So guys, welcome to the routing section of this crash course. You can go ahead and delete all the imports that we're not using because we don't need them. You can also delete this and also this. So guys, we want to implement some sort of routing system so that when we click these links, we go to some different page. So this would be the home page, this would be the post page, and this would be the users page. So I'm going to remove this unordered list, and I'm going to have a H1 that says this is the home page. So as you can see, it says this is the home page over here. So when we click on post, we want it to say this is the post page. So how can we implement this in Next.js? And guys, this is extremely easy to do in Next.js. All you have to do is go to your pages folder and create a new file and name it whatever you want the route segment to be. In our case, we want it to say posts. So this will be localhost 3000/posts. So all you have to do is create a posts.js file. And inside this file, we need to export a component. So we can say export default function called posts. And then we just want to return a H1 that says this is the post page. So now if you save this and then you go to your URL and then you say localhost 3000/posts, you can see this is the post page appearing. So that's how easy it is to create routes in Next.js. All you have to do is create a file and you name it what segment you want. So we wanted our segment to be posts, so that's why we created a file called posts.js. So guys, if you go back to our home page, and what we want to do is that when we click on posts, then we want to go to the post page. So we can do that in Next.js using the link component. So in our navbar.js, we can import the link component that is built into Next.js. So we can import link from next/link, and then we need to wrap our list in this link component. So we can have our link component here, and inside it we have the post list, and then this link component accepts a href as a prop. So you can say that the href is equal to the /posts. So now if you save this, click on posts, this will take you to the /post page. So we can auto format this again. So guys, just to reiterate, so you have the link component, inside it you have the list, and the link component accepts a href prop, which takes you to the route that you want to go to. So in this case, the href is /posts. So when we click on posts, it takes us to /posts, and then you can see this is the post page. So guys, now I have a challenge for you. Can you create a users page so that when you click on users, you go to a different page and it says this is the users page? So I'll give you some time to do it on your own, and I'll see you when you're done. Welcome back everyone. I hope you're able to solve this challenge on your own, but if you weren't, it's alright. Let's go through it together now. So what we want to do is that when we click on users, we want to go to a page that says this is the users page. So all we have to do for that is go to our pages folder and then create a new file, and we can call it users.js. And in this file, we have to export a component. So we can say export default function, and we'll call it users. And we just return a h1 that says this is the user's page. And then we have to save this. And then we have to go to our navbar.js file. And then we have to wrap this users list in the link component. So we can say link. And then we want the href to be /users. And then we want our list to be inside it. And now if we save and then we click on users, you can see this is the users page and our URL is localhost 3000/users. So guys, do you see how easy it is to create routes with Next.js? If you did it with React, you'd have to use a browser router and route, and it would get pretty messy very quickly. So Next.js makes it much cleaner. Now guys, this works and all, but there's one problem with our website. And that's when we click on these links, our navbar disappears. And now to fix this, you guys might be tempted to import the navbar in the users and post files and then use it there. So something like this. So you return a fragment and then you put the navbar on top. And you do the same thing with the users file. You return a fragment, and then you put the h1 in there, and then you put the navbar on top. And once you save, you should see the navbar appearing. And yes, when you click on the links, it does work, but this isn't the best way to do this. And why is that? And that's because every time you go to a different URL, this navbar is being re-rendered. So we are re-rendering this navbar multiple times, even though it does not change. So this can cause performance issues. We want this navbar to stay persistent. So this is where the _app.js file comes in. So in this file, you can see we're exporting a function called app. This is like the entry point of your application. This is where every single page that you create comes from. So you can add things to this function if you want it to appear in all pages. So if we return a fragment, and then on top of the component, we have a h1 that says hello world, then this hello world will appear in every single page. And that's because every single page comes from this component, and then you have hello world on top of it. So this hello world will appear in every single page. So if you go to users, you can see the hello world, and if you go to post, you can see the hello world. So that's why this is the perfect place to have our navbar, because we want the navbar to be in every single page, and then if we have it here, then it's going to appear in every single page. So we can just add the navbar here, and we can save, and then we have two navbars. That's because we also have a navbar in the users and the post.js file. So we can remove it from there. So once you save, you can see the navbar appearing in all the pages, and this navbar is not being re-rendered multiple times. It maintains its state and it is persistent. So this makes the website very performant. So guys, we can't click on the home page because we don't have a link in our navbar. So now if we go to our navbar.js, we need to add the link to our root directory. So we can have another link, and the href will be just a slash. That's because that's the home or the root directory. And then we can put our home list inside there. And once we save, and then we can go on all these pages. So we can go to home. This is the home page. Well, you can see that there's two navbars here because in the index.js file over here, we have the navbar. So we can just remove it. And then once we save, we should just have one navbar. So now we can go on all the links. So posts/users, and home is the root directory. So guys, let's see what I mean by when I say that the navbar maintains its state. So if we go to our navbar.js, and in our navbar, let's say we add an input to our unordered list. So over here, I'm going to add an input of type text. And when you save, you should see an input over here. And we can give this input a placeholder of search. So essentially the user can search for anything over here. So placeholder search. So that's our input label. And let's say we type something into this input. So for example, a user's name, so Jack. So if we switch to any links like the home or users page, the navbar maintains its state. It is not being re-rendered. But this is not the case if we had the navbar like before. So if we went to the individual pages like users and we added a navbar there, so navbar, and the same thing in the post page, so /navbar. Now if we save, and if we type something in the input like Jack, and then we move to a different page like posts, you can see that this navbar loses its state. You can't see Jack in the search anymore. That's because the navbar has been re-rendered. Whereas the top navbar, which is from the app file, it maintains its state. And so that is why the website is better and it's more performant, because you're not re-rendering components that you don't need to re-render. So now we can just remove the navbar from the posts and the users, and we can just have one navbar, which is in the app.js file. Congratulations guys, you just learned the first way to create routes in Next.js. So just a quick recap of what we've learned. So to create a route in Next.js, all you have to do is create a new JavaScript file with the name of the route. So we have the index.js, that's always the root directory, so that's just a slash. And then we have post.js, that's slash posts. And we have users.js, which is just slash users. So guys, this summarizes the first way to create routes in Next.js. But there's also another way. So the second way to create routes in Next.js is using folders. So this is method 2. So in your pages folder, you create a new folder with the name of the route. So say we wanted to create a route called posts, and we created a posts folder, and inside this folder we created a file called index.js. So that will create the slash post route. And the same thing with the users. If you wanted to create a users route, you have to create a users folder inside your pages folder and create a file inside the users folder called index.js, and that will create a slash users file. So now let's implement this method in our app. So guys, let's recreate the post page. So if we delete this page, you can see that we have an error. We have 404, this page could not be found. So inside our pages folder, we create a new folder called posts. And inside this post folder, we create a new file called index.js. And in this file, if we export a function, so export default function, we'll call it posts. And we'll return a h1 that says this is the post page. So now if we save, you can see the post page appearing again. So just to recap what we did, to create a post route, the second way, what we did is that we went to the pages folder. Inside that folder, we created a new file called posts. And inside that, we created a new file called index.js. And that's the page that's being rendered in our slash post route. So guys, now I want you guys to try to create a users route using the second method. So let's see if you guys can do it. I'll give you some time and I'll see you when you're done. Welcome back everyone. I hope you were able to do that on your own, but if you weren't, it's alright. Let's go through it together now. So let's first delete this users page. So now you should see that we're getting a 404 error. So to create the new users route, all we have to do is go to our pages folder. Inside that, create a new folder and call it users. And inside the newly created users folder, we'll create a new file called index.js. And that's the page that will be rendered. So inside this index.js, we need to export a function. So export default function. We'll call it users. And we'll return a h1 that says this is the users page. So now if we save, you should see the users page reappearing. So that's how you do it. Pretty simple. You just create a users folder and then you have index.js, and that's the file that will get rendered. So now this works just like before. We can go to the posts, we can go to the users, and we can go to home. So guys, now you might be wondering, what is the point of this method? Why don't we just use the first method? Well, the point of this method is that with this way, we can create nested routes. So right now we have slash users and then slash posts. But what if you wanted nested routes? What if you wanted to go to each individual user? So for example, what if you wanted to go to slash users slash jack? So how can we create a nested route like this? Well, Next.js makes it pretty easy with this folder system. So all you have to do is go to your users folder, and inside that you create a new file called jack.js or whatever you want the route to be. And inside it you export a function. And we have a h1 that says this is the user jack. So now if you save, and now if we go to slash localhost 3000 slash users slash jack, you should see this is the user jack. So now we just created a nested route, slash users slash jack. But what if you wanted to go even deeper? What if you wanted one of his individual posts? So something like slash users slash jack slash post 1. So something like this. As you can see right now, we don't have that route, so we have a 404 page. So to create this route, all you have to do is go to users, and then you have to create a new folder called jack. And inside you have the index.js file. So in this file, slash jack will be rendered. So we can go to jack.js and we can copy this and we can cut this and we can paste it inside the index.js inside the jack folder. And we can save and we can delete the jack.js file. So now if we go to slash users slash jack, you should see this is the user jack. So how do we do this? So we had the users folder, and inside the users folder, we had the jack folder, and inside that we had index.js, and the component inside this index.js file is what will be rendered inside the slash jack route. So now if we wanted slash jack slash post 1, so something like this, all we have to do is go to the jack folder and create a new file called post1.js, and inside it you export a function and call it this is jack post 1. And the name of the function can be anything, it doesn't matter, so we just leave it as Jack. And then if we save, you can see that this page renders, this is Jack post 1. So that's how you create nested routes in Next.js. And this folder routing system makes it very easy for us. So guys, let's recap what we just learned about nested routes. So essentially what we learned is that to create deeply nested routes, all we have to do is keep on creating folders inside of folders until we reach the nested route that we want to. We created a users folder inside pages, so the index.js file inside the users folder will render the /users page. So now if we wanted nested routes inside of users, so we wanted something like users/jack, so something like this, then we create another folder inside of users and we name it what we want the route to be. So in this case, we want the route to be Jack, so we created a Jack folder inside users. So inside the Jack folder, we created an index.js file, and that's the file that will be rendered for /users/jack URL. So the index.js is the root page for every folder. So inside the users folder, we have index.js that will render /users. And inside the Jack folder, we have index.js that will render /users/jack. So the index.js will render its parent folder. So guys, this is very important to understand. So to drive this home, I'll repeat myself once more. So we have the URL /users/jack, which is being rendered by this index.js. And that's because what's the parent folder of this index.js? Well, that's Jack. So that's why this file will render /users/jack. And now let's take a look at this index.js file which renders /users. What's the parent folder of this index.js file? Well, it's this users folder, right? So that's why this index.js file renders /users. And then we have this post1.js which renders the page for the URL /users/jack/post1. And why is that? Because we have post1.js which is inside Jack and Jack is inside users. And that's why this post1.js file renders the page for /users/jack/post1. So I hope that made sense. Guys, this is a very important concept to understand. So to practice this even more, I'm giving you guys a challenge. So guys, the challenge for you is to create a page with the URL /post/sports/trending/jack. And when you go to this URL, it should display this heading. So it should say, these are the sports related trending posts by Jack. So I'll give you guys some time to do this challenge on your own and I'll see you when you're done. Welcome back everyone, I hope you were able to solve the challenge on your own, but if you weren't, it's alright, that was a bit of a tricky question. So before we start, let's quickly clean our workspace, so let's close the terminal and then let's close all the tabs that we're not using. And now let's close all the folders that we do not need. So we're in the post page, so /posts. So guys, let's see what the question wanted. So the question wanted this URL, which is /post/sports/trending/jack. So let me just write that down over here. So guys, this is the route that we want to create. Right now, we just have /posts. So now we need to create a sports route inside of the post folder. So all we have to do is create a new folder called sports. And inside it, we can have the index.js file, which will render the /sports page. So we can just copy this and then paste it here. And we can replace this with sports. And the name of the function doesn't really matter. So we are just going to leave that. So now if you go to a URL and then type /post/sports, you should see this is the sports page being rendered. So now we created the sports page and now we have to create the trending page. And that is also very simple. All you have to do is create a trending folder inside of the sports folder. So create a new folder, call it trending. Inside I have an index.js. And you can replace sports with trending. And then if you go to URL and add a /trending, you should see this is the trending page. So guys, now we covered up to trending for this challenge. So now we need a /jack. And there's two ways we can do this. So inside the trending, we can just have a new file called jack.js. So we have a new file called jack.js. And inside it, we have to render for the challenge. These are the sports related trending posts by Jack. So let's type that. So once we type this and save, and we add a /jack to this URL, you should see these are the sports related trending posts by Jack. So that completes our challenge. So this was one way to do it, but there's also another way. So the other way we can do it is that in the trending folder, we can have another folder called Jack. And inside it, we have an index.js file that renders this. So we can delete this jack.js. And now if we save, you should see the page reappearing. Now you don't have to do it this way. You can just have the jack.js, but I just showed you so you know how to do it. And so that's it. That's the challenge completed. So congratulations guys. That concludes this challenge section. And with that, we've completed the routing section of this course. So now we'll be moving on to another very important topic, which is the dynamic route section. So let's get right into it. So guys, first let's understand what is meant by dynamic routes. So in the previous section, we covered how to create nested routes. So we have /users/jack/post1. But all these URLs or routes we created, they were hard coded. We added these folders ourselves. But if we have an app with a lot of users, like thousands, then it doesn't make sense for us to hard code those values. We need to create them dynamically. And so that's where Next.js becomes so powerful because it has a very easy to use dynamic route section. So for example, if we had 10,000 users and we needed to create individual routes for each of those users, so for example, /Jack, /Kim, /Sarah, instead of having a folder with the name of the route that we want, what we do is we create a JavaScript file and then we surround the name in square brackets. So in this case, we want the dynamic route to be the usernames, right? So what we do is that inside the users folder, we create a file called username.js, and we want this route to be dynamic, so we surround the username in square brackets. So this is telling Next.js that we want this to be a dynamic route, so this will keep on changing. So this is the first step to creating a dynamic route. Once we do this, we need to use the built-in router system of Next.js, so Next.js built it for us. We need to use that router system to get the query that the user made. So if the user made the query /Jack, then we need to somehow get that Jack from the username, right? So we need to get that using the Next.js router system, and then we can use that in our component. So now let's see how that works. Alright guys, let's come back to VS Code, and then inside the users folder, you can delete the Jack folder because we don't need it anymore. So once we delete that, now we have to create a dynamic route. So we create a new file, and we'll be calling it username.js, and we'll be surrounding username with square brackets. So username.js. So now this file is dynamic. So now we need to export a function in this file. So export default function. I'm going to be calling a user. And we'll be returning a h1 that says this is user. And then whatever the username was. So guys, the username we want here, that needs to be created dynamically. And we need to get that username from the URL. So if we go to the URL and then have something like /users/Jack, we need to get this Jack username dynamically, and we can get that using Next.js's built-in router. And right now we're getting this error because we haven't saved this file yet. So once we save this file, we just get this is user, and we can have anything and we won't get an error. We won't get a 404. That's because this route is being created dynamically. So right now what we have to do is you have to get this segment, so this username section from the router. So we need to import the use router from Next.js. So on the top we say import use router from next/router. So now we can use this, and inside our function we can say const router is equal to use router, and it's a function. So we need to call it. So now let's just console.log the router to see what it is. So console.log router, and then let's save and let's open our console. And inside our console, you can see a bunch of objects being logged. Well, the first two are from navbar.js when we logged the CSS file. So we don't have to worry about this. But what we have to worry about is this object being logged from username.js. That's because it's the router over here. So guys, if you open up this object, you can see that there's a lot of properties in this object. But the one we're interested in is this query property over here. So let's just console.log the router.query. So now if we save, you can see that there's another object being logged, and inside it there's this username. And the value of this username key is this value over here, which is from the URL. So this is coming from the username from this file over here. So using the router.query, we can access the dynamic route segment. So we can actually destructure this object. So we can say const, and then we destructure it. So the username is equal to router.query. And now we can use this username over here. So you can say this is the username. So now if we save, you can see the username appearing over here. So now this route segment can be anything. We can call it Jack, and you can see this is user Jack. We can call it Sarah, and you can see Sarah appearing, and we can call it anything, and you will see it over here because this is being rendered dynamically. So guys, that's how easy it is to create a dynamic route in Next.js. So now let's just do a quick recap of what we did. So to create a dynamic route, the first step is to create a JavaScript file with the name of the dynamic route segment in square brackets. So in our case, we wanted the dynamic route to be the username. So we created a username file and we surrounded it with square brackets. So then this tells Next.js that this page is dynamic. And step 2 is to get the dynamic route query using the useRouter module. So we need to import useRouter from next/router, and this is a function, so we need to call that function. So once we call the function, it will return an object, and inside that object there will be a query property, and from there we need to destructure the dynamic route segment from the query property. So in our case it's the username, so we destructure the username from router.query. And then we can use the dynamic route segment anywhere in our component. And in our case, you're using it as a username. So that's all there is to creating a dynamic route in Next.js. And with that, we've concluded the dynamic route section. And now let's move on to the next section, which is implementing server-side rendering. So guys, implementing server-side rendering, or SSR, deals with how we fetch data in Next.js. So in traditional React apps, we fetch data on the client. So this is probably how you're used to fetching data in React. So you'd have a use effect. And inside it, you'll have an async function that fetches data. So const fetch data is an async function. And then you'll have a response. So const res is equal to fetch. And you'll have a URL inside here, and we need to await this because it's an async function. So guys, we need an API to fetch data from. So the one we'll be using is this one. So go on Google and then type JSON placeholder. And then click the first link over here, jsonplaceholder.typicode.com. And over here, go down to /posts and then copy this and then paste it over here. So that's the API we'll be using. And then we can say const data is equal to await the rest.json. And then we need to put the data in some sort of state. So let's make some state for our posts. So const posts and set posts is equal to use state. And initially it will just be an empty array. And then over here, we just set posts to data. And then we need to call the function over here. So fetch data. And then we need to have our dependency array. So now if we console.log the posts, and then we go to our console, you can see an array of 100 elements, and then we have all our posts over here. And then we can just map over these posts and then show them in our post page. But guys, this is client-side rendering, and as we stated before in the beginning part during the server-side rendering section, we know that client-side rendering can cause problems for search bots, which can make us have bad SEO, and also if the user has slow internet, then client-side rendering can be quite slow. So let's take a look at how that can happen. So guys, now we can just map over the post and then display the data over here. So you can say posts.map, and we'll take each post and return a list with the post.title. And then the key can just be the post.id. So now if we save, you can see all the posts over here. But guys, as we discussed in the server-side rendering section in the beginning of the course, this is all rendered on the client. So this can cause problems for search bots which try to index web pages for SEO. So with this way, we might have bad SEO performance. So one way we can counter that is by rendering this on the server. So we render it on the server and then we send it to the client. So then the search bots can see all the content and then they can index it and we have much better SEO performance. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that all of this is fetched on the server? Well, in Next.js, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is include another function and it's called getServerSideProps. So you export an async function and it's called getServerSideProps. You need to make sure that it's spelled the exact same way. This function is built by Next.js. This is not what we're naming it. This is from Next.js, guys. This will make sure that the data you fetch here is fetched on the server. So again, we're not naming this ourselves. This is named by Next.js and we're using their function. So inside this function, you do the same thing. You fetch the data. So I'm just going to copy this part and then paste it over here. And I'm just going to comment this part out because we don't need it. So now we're fetching the data over here, but how do we access it in our post component? Well, it's very simple. All you have to do is return an object from this function. So this function will return an object, and inside this object we'll have a props property. So this props will also be an object, and in it you can return the data. So we can say the posts is the data. So now we can access this props in our component over here, and then we can destructure it to get the posts. So we just destructure the posts, and now we can use the post over here. So guys, before we save this, we need to protect ourselves. So we need to have a question mark over here, because initially when it tries to build a page, the data might not be there. So we need to protect ourselves with this question mark. So this is a safe way of handling the variable here. So now if we save, you can see that the data is gone. So we need to just refresh, and you can see that the data is back. This is all rendered on the server, guys. We're not using a use effect. This is all rendered in the server. So this is very powerful, and this is very SEO performant. And that's how you fetch data on the server in Next.js. So guys, this is probably the most important concept that you need to understand about Next.js. It's server-side rendering. So to really drive this home, let's do a quick recap of what we did. So a recap of fetching data using server-side rendering. Step 1, you need to fetch the data in the getServerSideProps function. So you export an async function called getServerSideProps. Again, this is from Next.js, we're not naming it ourselves. And inside it, you fetch the data normally as you would. And step 2, inside the getServerSideProps function, you need to return an object with a props property. So we're returning an object. Inside the object, we have a props, and that props is also an object. And inside that object, you have your data. Step 3 is you need to pass the props down to your component. So in step 2, you're returning the props, and in step 3, you're accessing the props in your component. And then you can destructure the props object to get the posts, and then you can use it in your component. And also don't forget the optional chaining, because sometimes initially when the page is being built, the data might not be there. So this optional chaining makes sure that you protect yourself and it doesn't freak out when the data is not there. And that's all you have to do to implement server-side rendering. So guys, make sure you understand server-side rendering very well. This is probably the most important concept for Next.js. So rewatch the server-side rendering part a couple of times if you have to, and make sure that you understand it very well. And with that, we conclude the last part of the crash course. I know it was hard, but trust me, it was all worth it. There's still more stuff to learn about Next.js that we'll learn in the next videos. But for now, this is all, and I hope you have a good understanding of the basics of Next.js. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.